Sure. So to be clear, this is not an anti-loitering law. It's not illegal to merely be inside a drug-free zone. What the law requires is 2 more people have to be congregated in the drug-free designated area with the purpose to violate Title IV of the Controlled Schedule Act, and those are the drug regulations. So that would be distribution or possession of drug activities. So they actually have to have that purpose or intent. So with that, really, the goal is to have heightened awareness in this area to make sure our officers are out here visibly, but if you're in the area, it's not illegal to simply be in that area. And if we do have the purpose, if an officer is able to establish that a person is in that area with the purpose to violate those statutes, they would then direct that person to leave the area. It is a drug-free zone. If that person was to remain after that, then they could be subject to being arrested.
Obviously, if we can perform this, we saw a drug dealer last year. What is the subtle difference between having drug dealers on one day to get to the now?
Sure. So absolutely. So really, the drug-free zone, it gives better awareness to the community of the area. It highlights the area where we are having drug activity at, as well. It provides an increased presence in that area. And it does give us the ability to engage individuals that are in the area with the purpose to engage in drug activity, to have them leave that area. We did not have that ability before the law was implemented.
What are you specifically looking for to determine if it's drug-related activity? Do you need to see
Sure.
an actual hand-to-hand buy or something?
Sure. So that's a great question. How do we establish that? So we have to take the totality of the circumstances, the information that's out there. So an example would be if you saw a hand-to-hand transaction, if it's a known drug salesperson, a person who's been arrested in the area, and then you were to observe something that you believe was a hand-to-hand transaction. As was pointed out earlier, if we were able to establish probable cause that there was a distribution that occurred, that would be charged. But after that happened, we would still have to give the person notice to leave the drug-free zone before we could actually enforce the drug-free zone portion of that.
And how would it apply to decriminalize drugs like marijuana?
Sure, I'm sorry, can you say that again?
How would it apply to decriminalize drugs like marijuana?
Sure. So the law does apply to the Title IV of the Controlled Substance Act. So if they were illegally distributing marijuana here, simply possessing marijuana in your pocket would not establish that.
And some critics would say that this unfairly targets lower income people, people of color. How do you respond to that?
Sure. The goal of this law is really to bring a heightened awareness to the community related to drug activity. And we have multiple members of the community that are concerned about the drug sales and activity in that area. So really, this has helped address that. We're applying this across the district in all of our districts where the data supports. If the data does not support it, we will not implement them there.
When I was here this morning around 9, we saw a lot of police cars. Lights flashing, driving slowly. Today, you're here, everyone's gone.
Sure.
What do you want to see?
No, so what I want to see is I want to see officers out of the cars. I want to see them engaged in the community, talking to people. I know that some of our officers are handing out cards that provide the same information that are actually on the warning signs. But outside of that, I just want to see regular community engagement like we'd see everywhere across the district at any time, regardless if it's a drug-free zone or not. This is a very populous area, so we want our members to be out there engaging the community.
Is there any specific guidance that you've given the officers or trainers
Sure. So after the law was implemented, we provided specific training bulletins to our members related to the law and what the law says, as well as examples, so they had that. Also, it's really important that our supervisors, as we implement the drug-free zones, speak to our members, make sure that if they do have any questions or need additional clarity, that they can have that information before they implement it. We're requiring all of our members to acknowledge that they have received the training.
Are there any other plans for any additional drug-free zones, or
Sure. So as I mentioned earlier, as the data supports that, we'll evaluate that and where they may be supported by the data.
All officers are trained for this.
No, this is sent out to the entire police force, so everyone has awareness of it, the training bulletins, as well as ensuring that they are clear on that. And like any sort of policy that comes out there, we can also look at different ways and may implement different ways to enhance training if that's needed as well. I'm sorry, can you... No, so we pushed out a training bulletin, one specific to the drug-free zones, and then also another one related to the overall Secure DC Act that addresses the other provisions. But we wanted to make sure that we did provide specific guidance just to the drug-free zones.
There's been some fear that this is sort of a going back to 1990s crack cocaine methamphetamine jump out style poison. I think it's a little while.
Sure. So I mean, I think as any of you can see today, there's a police presence out here. There's no officers getting out of vehicles. There's signs up posting those areas. It's very clear of where the areas are. And that's the reason that we're out here today. We want to be transparent about where they are. There are requirements as far as making sure we put that notification out, and not only putting the signs up, but we also have to provide that notification at least 24 hours in advance to the council members, the directors of DBH, Department of Health, and I do have Dr. Bazron here as well with me today, representing DBH, but a variety of stakeholders, so they also have awareness of where our zones will be at, and if there's any other enhancement or coordination like we had with DBH in those areas. No, we have no arrests related to the drug-free zones. All right. Yes, sir.
So just to confirm that will the police kind of posted up during all the hours?
I'm sorry, you have to speak up. It's hard to hear you.
Will the police posted up in all these areas during this time?
There'll be a visible police presence in the areas. It may fluctuate depending on the time of day and the location, but there will be a visible presence in each area. Yes, sir.
So will people get arrested for using marijuana in these areas, or is it just possession?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Will people get arrested for using marijuana in these areas? Or
Sure. So it's illegal to smoke marijuana in public. So that is. But if you're inside your residence or not in public, you can possess and you can use marijuana. You just can't do it in public. Any other questions? Yes, sir. Can you speak up a little? I'm sorry. Sure. So what's the purpose of the drug-free zones? Yeah, I touched on it earlier, but really it's kind of twofold. It's enhanced the community awareness, so how we develop these areas is based on the number of reports related to crimes of violence, drug arrests, and calls for service from the community members related to drug activity, so it's awareness of that. And it's also to try to bring some relief to the community for the drug activity that's going on there.
Are there certain zones?
There are. I talked about it earlier, but there are actually, right now, there's 3 zones here in the district. There's one here in Chinatown that we're at right now. There's one in the 6th district in the area of Benning and Minnesota Avenue, and there's one in the 7th district in Woodland Terrace. And we'll continue to evaluate those as the time goes on for other potential areas, as the data supports.
I have
All
a
right.
question.
Yes, ma'am.
So what is, because in this law, it's stated that the police have a right to be like probable cause or intent. So what is the training to say what is the intent or probable cause that someone is doing a drug transaction when they're not literally doing a drug transaction? So what would be the training behind that? And have all officers been trained to learn what is intent and probable cause around a drug transaction?
Yeah, so actually what the drug-free zone law requires is you can give an order to someone to leave the defined drug-free zone area if they have the purpose to engage in Title IV of the Controlled Substance Act. That is the distribution or possession.
Right,
so you have to be able to establish
Establish.
merely being in the area is not a violation of that. So kind of what we talked about earlier, some things that could establish that. If you saw a hand-to-hand transaction, that would not necessarily be enough to arrest the person for a hand-to-hand transaction, right? That'd be enough to go up to the person, approach them, talk to them, give awareness. We're in a drug-free zone. If you can establish that based on that, there may be other factors. You have to look at things like prior history. Have you had prior interactions? Have you arrested that person for drug sales? But any of those one things alone is not just enough. You have to be able to establish that. And even after that, if you were to establish that as the purpose, then you would have to say, this is a drug-free zone. You have to leave the drug-free zone area. Then if the person was to say to refuse and you establish that, then you may arrest them for violation of the drug-free zone.
If the person is saying I don't have any drugs, they let you want to search them, that can you still make them leave?
I'm sorry, say that again.
So for instance, I worry about an unhoused person laying down and maybe sleeping here. And the intent of that person may be having on drugs because they're laying down and disorientated.
Yeah.
So that's like an intent and a probable cause that the police can tell that unhoused person that have nowhere to live to move.
Yeah, that's not the goal of this law, and that's not what's there. You actually have
Right,
to.
so that's what I'm asking
yeah,
about
you have to have
training.
you have to have the purpose for that. So the training that was provided, like I talked about earlier, is the training bulletins, the awareness of that. But simply being in the zone is not a violation of the law. There are some unhoused folks inside several of the areas right now, but being in the area and being unhoused or anything else is not a violation of the law. It's not a reason for a police officer to make anyone move from that area.
Have all police been trained on how to deal with the drug-free zones?
They have been. So we talked about that a little earlier. So when the law was approved and passed, We put out training to all the force as well as the updated policies so people had awareness of that. And also we're having our supervisors go out to these areas to make sure that there is clarity of that if there is any questions about that.
So how was the training done?
Sure, training bulletins. So push out training bulletin, a bulletin.
Oh, the training bulletin is
Yes,
just a piece of
ma'am.
paper.
A training bulletin.
Y'all training people with paper.
Yes,
Is
ma'am.
there any support being given to community members that may be struggling with housing special drug use, given the amount of police presence that is now in predominantly black unhoused areas?
Sure. So right now the areas that we're putting police presence in, just related to the drug-free zones, are the areas that are supported by data. But we do have Dr. Bazron here from DVH. She can talk a little bit about what resources and the other things that we're doing in these areas outside of what you see as a police presence. Dr.
We're
Bazron?
not just criminalizing people, we're actually giving them resources.
No, absolutely not. Our goal is to provide the support.
Hard to hear you. Could you just introduce yourself? Can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, okay, I have to sort of shout a little bit. Our goal really is to provide people with the supports they need, the behavioral health supports that they need. We actually have staff in each of these areas who are doing outreach to individuals who might have a substance use disorder or a behavioral health disorder. We also have staff located at the hub, for example, right here. Here's one of my staff, and their goal is to talk to people, to try to engage them in care, and if they need care, to see that they get that care. We also have 3 harm reduction providers who work in each of these areas, who are there not only, for example, for individuals with substance use disorders who may need things like clean syringes, naloxone, wound care supplies and so forth, to give those to them, as well as here again attempting to engage them in services. Additionally, our community response team responds 24/7 to individuals who might be experiencing a mental health concern, as does our outreach team.
All right, we'll take one more question here, and then we're good to go. Yes, sir.
Simple one. Got here late. Got out of a cab just now. Hit over with the smell of marijuana. Is that the kind of thing that you're focusing on, or are we focusing on things like opioids, fentanyl, the drugs that are killing people?
Sure.
What is the focus? Because I know people complain about the smell of marijuana. Marijuana is killing people to the rate that things like fentanyl or opioids. So what's the focus?
Sure, absolutely. So kind of what we talked about before, really the focus is twofold, right? The community engagement and awareness. These areas are designated that because of the number of drug arrests, the number of calls for service, and the crimes of violence and dangerous crimes that occur in these areas. That's how they are selected. So really the goal, it does address all drugs. It's not specific to one if it's illegal. However, that's why we have these resources out here. The goal is not to arrest anyone. The goal is not to arrest people for being in a drug-free zone. It's to try to have better impacts on the community. It's to try to give these folks, as Dr. Bazron pointed out, the resources that they need and bring relief to the areas.
And if I could just follow, look at some of the other cities that have had established drug-free zones, and the zones themselves have been successful. However, what happens is there's a push out. The activity moves to adjacent neighborhoods. It can't be all places at all times. So how do you deal with what does become the trend once a drug-free zone is established?
Sure, absolutely. So to that point, drug-free zones, they cannot go any longer than 5 days, 120 hours total. So with that, so it is a short-term solution, and it is based on the data that we have. We have resources in Chinatown outside of this drug-free zone. The hub is right across the street. We have officers assigned to our Chinatown area, on footbeats in this area. So the presence that you see, although it's an increased presence, there is a presence always here. We're constantly evaluating the crime that happens in areas to determine that. So you'll see these areas across the district, not just here, and we're prepared. And our plan has to be prepared to address any sort of output from that.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. All right, thanks everybody. We appreciate your time. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Bazin. I appreciate you coming out. It's good seeing you as always. Absolutely. Thanks, man. Good to see you. Take it easy.